Hello and welcome to the first lesson in this series on Linux. So let's start by describing what is Linux. It's an operating system that was developed by Finnish software engineer Linus Torvalds in collaboration with Richard Stallman, who founded the GNU project, and I'm not gonna get through the whole history about how they accomplished in creating the operating system we know today. However, I did link their Wikipedia pages in the description, so if you want to read about it yourself, you're free to do so at your convenience. And how is Linux different from Windows? Well, Windows is an operating system that has its code written by a private corporation, Microsoft. And Microsoft doesn't allow any modification to their operating system that's not approved internally. So basically, if you want to take Windows apart and customize it to your own liking, you can't do that, it's illegal. But with Linux being an open source project, meaning that the code of the operating system is public knowledge. Anyone can access it on the internet, anyone can download it, anyone can do anything they want to it. And so Linux doesn't really come in versions like Windows. Like for example, you have Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 8, 8.1, 10. Because that code is modified by so many people, in the Linux world, we refer to all those operating systems as distributions. A distribution is an operating system that's based on Linux, designed by a specific group of individuals or organizations that added their own customizations and features to the base operating system. If you go online on Google and type favorite Linux distros, you get bombarded with a list of so many distributions that I don't know some of them. In fact, most of them. They're a complete mystery to me. But the most common versions of Linux are the ones that are based on Debian and Red Hat. And the reason for that is basically those are the primary distributions that all of the other distributions were made over through something called forking. Now, when you hear the word fork, most of you will probably think of a kitchen utensil. But in the open source world, forking is the process of taking something made by someone else and sprinkling your own style over it. And hey presto, you made another distribution. And if we look over this graph, we kind of understand what forking means. See, this is Debian, and these are all the fork branches that came out of Debian. There are hundreds and hundreds of distributions here. I mean, it's impossible to know them all. But all of them came to being by taking this base distribution and practically modifying it over and over again. We also have Red Hat here, which is another common Linux distribution, and a whole slew of other operating systems were made based on Red Hat. So if, for example, someone knows how to operate the distribution CentOS, that person also probably knows how to use Red Hat, because CentOS is just a fork of Red Hat. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that you don't need to know each and every one of these distributions. It's only necessary to know one distribution of that specific family and you're good to go. So why should you use Linux instead of Windows as your primary operating system? Well, the short answer is you shouldn't if no one forces you to. However, Linux comes with a bunch of benefits that Windows doesn't provide. For example, it's highly customizable, it's more secure than Windows, and this is because, like I said before, Linux is an open source operating system and millions of people around the world study it and make updates for it every single day. Microsoft can only dream of having so many talented engineers that work on their operating system on a daily basis. And so security patches and fixes for Linux come very often than you see on Windows. Another reason to use Linux is that most of its software that's available to use and download is open source, meaning that it's free. So for every application you can use on Windows that requires a paid license, like let's say for instance Adobe Photoshop, there's also a free alternative on Linux, like GIMP, for example, GNU Image Manipulation Tool, which is almost as good as Adobe Photoshop. It's still a little rough around the edges, but the good thing is that being an open source software, it's always updated and improved by the community. So maybe one day it will be as good as Photoshop, who knows. And the final reason you should use Linux is for the fact that it's highly customizable. You can make it look like whatever you want it to look like. You're not restricted by anything except your imagination. And the last point I want to make is if you clicked on this video, you probably want to learn Linux for reasons that might benefit you, whether you want to know how to operate or how to manage it. Feel free to follow my lessons and maybe I'll be able to teach you something. That's it for this video. Subscribe and stay tuned for more upcoming lessons.